योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोतं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि। आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम्।
Hope you've been enjoying the series on Iyengar Yoga so far. Today we'll be seeing PARSVOTANASANA. All standing poses are very important for a regular practice. Of course, as you know, there are several poses in yoga, but standing poses is the point where you can make several adjustments, be aware of the adjustments, feel how the adjustments work, and this alone delivers enormous strength to the legs as well as the spine, both of which are very important. Today we'll be seeing PARSVOTANASANA, which is an asana in the Paschima Prathanasthiti. By Paschima Prathanasthiti, we mean bending forward from a standing pose. In the previous episodes, we've seen Tadasana, Utkatasana, which have been variations in the standing position itself. In a Paschima Pranasthiti pose, we extend forward. PARSVOTANASANA is very beneficial to the paraspinal muscles, the quadricep, the hamstring, the calf muscle, and it delivers great mental alertness. Initially, when you begin, you feel that it's a little difficult to gain balance in the pose, and that makes you want to focus. And when that makes you want to focus, the mind tunes into the body in such a way that there is stability and alertness. So let's begin our practice of PARSVOTANASANA today. Now we will be mentioning the parts of the body that will be used in PARSVOTANASANA. It is very imperative that we pay acute attention to the parts of the body that are being addressed. In Tadasana, first we'll have to pay attention to the sternum. The sternum, that is a bone that is in the center of the chest. From the base of the breast all the way towards the notch of the collarbone is the sternum. It is the bone connecting the two sides of the rib cage, the central bone. The next part that we'll be seeing is the sides of the body. So the practitioner will turn to the side. The arms are going to be lifted up to show you, connecting the outer hip to the outer armpit. The outer armpit goes through the bottom floating rib and then comes through the side of the hip. This is the side of the body that we must pay attention to. The next is the back ribs. The entire back of the rib cage, if it stoops backward, it will compress the chest region. So the back rib cage must be pulled in, by which the sternum is sharply raised up to make sure that the hunch of the body is addressed and removed. Next, turning forward, we will look at the parts of the leg. The bone inside the thigh is called the femur bone, and that is important, the femur bone. When it comes to the foot, there are some important portions. One is the heel bone. To show the heel bone, I'm going to ask the practitioner to turn. Here is the sole of a person's foot. Within that, this portion marks the heel. In that, if you touch various parts of the heel, there are areas which nicely bounce. There is a good bounce inside. But towards the back middle heel, there is an area which is slightly resistant. This is bouncy, and here this is slightly resistant. There is the heel bone. We'll have to mark the area of the heel bone for this pose. The next is the arch of the foot. Normally, when a person stands, it's common to collapse the arch. The arch tends to be collapsed like this. We'll have to make sure that this arch is nicely lifted up. There should be a formation of this arch that is nicely lifted, not dropped, lifted. The next part of the foot that we will use is the outer heel. This is the entire circumference of the heel. Within that part of the heel which is on the side of the little toe is the outer heel. Outer heel in line with the little toe. Now we will start with instructions for the pose. It is important to note that the first step where a practitioner jumps from Tadasana, opens the legs apart and hands apart, should be done only by people who have no knee, hip or ankle problems. No problems either with the lower spine or the entire span of the leg. Assuming that the entire length of the leg is healthy, from Tadasana, you take your hand up to your chest, making sure the sides of the body are crisply lifted, the center of the sternum is nice and tall, and then in a swift jump, you open your legs and hands apart. In Vimanasana, making sure that the hands are wide apart, from the sternum you will have to lengthen all the way until the fingertips, knees and thighs back, top buttock muscle cutting down, sharp raise at the sides of the chest. You take your hands on your waist. Turn your right foot out completely. Your left foot turns in 60 degrees, which means if this was a straight line 90 degrees, this was a straight line 90 degrees, the practitioner turns the foot into 60 degrees, making sure that the body rotates completely facing the front leg, facing the front wall. We have to make sure that just like the sides of the face are in one line, the shoulder must be in one line, the floating rib must be in one line, and both sides of the outer hip must definitely be in one line. Keeping that, the shoulder should roll back, the sternum should lift tall, and the entire spine, right from the base all the way to the chest, must be lifted. For that, the spine should not hang forward, lifting right from the anterior side of the sacrum to lumbar, to dorsal, to chest to shoulders. The incline of the spine should be well ascended. Maintaining a lifted chest, you have to go with the chest leading forward, head back. Chest leading forward, head back until the body is parallel to the ground. The part that we mentioned, back rib, should be firmly inside and the sternum should reach forward. From there, the student releases the hand to the ground, wrist in line with the shoulder. This is the first position we assume, called concave back PARSVOTANASANA. We have to make sure that this pose is practiced very well for a long period of time before the full pose, that is with the head touching the shin, is approached. This pose should make sure that the hamstrings are well extended. The hip is rotated in one line. The back ribs are sharply in, removing any trace of the hunch. Sternum should pull forward and the chin should be nicely extended, eyes looking forward, not downward. From here, you come back up with your hands on your waist. Turn your right foot in. Jump, once again hands by the side in Tadasana. Now we will be moving to the full pose. As said before, it is very important to practice the halfway pose in the concave back position to make sure the back, the calf muscles, the paraspinal muscles are well accustomed before attempting the full pose. Starting the full pose, in Tadasana, take your hands in front of your chest, sides of the body well lifted, sternum lifted. As shown before, the femur bone should be back. The weight should be on the heel bone, but all parts of the foot should be firmly touching the floor equally between both legs. Jump, open the leg apart. Turn the right foot completely out. Left foot into a 60 degree, and then raising the chest up, keeping the entire anterior surface of the spine lifted, the hand is taken up to Urdhva Hastasana. In Urdhva Hastasana, because it moves from Vimanasana, the spreaded chest should now be well lifted. There should be a width and a length that is clearly established. From there, moving with the sternum and floating rib forward, making sure there is very firm contact of the heel bone as well as the outer heel. The outer heel must not come up. Pressing on the outer heel, you have to lengthen the sides of the body forward, lengthen the sternum forward, and then take the hands down by the sides of the leg. Lengthening your chest, you will have to make your head touch or rest on the shin. At no point should the head touch before the sternum. You have to make sure the sternum is lifted. The sternum, the heart region is first placed, rested on the thigh knee before the head touches the shin. The order should not be reversed. If that happens, if the head goes too quickly, the chest will compress. So the chest has to be lengthened, the chest should go, and then the head finally comes down. Coming up, you will have to lengthen all the way to Urdhva Hastasana once more, bringing the sides of the body tall, hands by the sides of the ear. Come to Urdhva Hastasana Sthiti. Take your hands, foot forward, hands jump by the sides of the feet in Tadasana.
In this standing position, if one is unable to bring one's hip into one line, how does one correct that?
So you will start once again with your legs apart, 3.5, 4 feet, hands on your waist, and turn to the position that you're referring to, where your foot is turned out and you're standing. See, you're talking about the misalignment where this hip is back and that hip is forward. Is that right? So now, usually whenever a person stands, you're going to be standing. The tendency is the foot that is in front, that hip will be dragged in front. The foot that is behind, that hip tends to get pushed behind. Therefore, the entire spine tends to be misaligned. So the alignment of the hip is crucial to address all faculties to do with both the spine as well as the organs of the body. I'll tell you how to go about it. When this hip is out of line, you really first have to get the outer hip of the back leg in front, and then the front hip of the front leg back. So there has to be a switch. So when this leg is in front and this is back, you have to kind of make this outer hip come forward and make this hip get pulled back. So that way the hip goes through the turn. Yeah? Now, in spite of that, if you still feel it's not in line, we'll have to look at the back thigh. There is the inner back thigh and then the outer back thigh. You have to roll the muscles of the thigh, back thigh, right at the top of the thigh from in to out, from inside to outside. Now you see there is a fraction more level. In spite of that, to get it further into line, you have to release the heel up, rotate the hip as much as possible, back hip in front, front hip at the back. The heel shouldn't be thrown out. The hip should rotate purposefully forward, and then you have to pin the outer edge of the heel back down. That is the point where you're steady. So the outer edge of the heel should be pinned back down, maintaining the squareness of the hip. Is the hip more square than when you started?
In the concave back position you talked about, I feel as though I still have a slight hunch in the dorsal. How does one deal with that?
Actually, this is a very pertinent question. The structure of the spine is pivotal to asana. Every asana must be unshakingly aligning the spine every single time. You see, usually in the spine, the shape of the spine itself is such that there is a hunch here. Okay, and then as far as the lumbar spine, that is the lower back spine is concerned, there is a tendency for it to be pushed forward. I will address both of them. We will go to the first one. When you have a hunched position, the back ribs project out. This collapses the chest down and compresses the diaphragm and respiratory region, both of which are not acceptable or healthy. You have to pull the back ribs in, rolling the shoulders back and raising the sternum up to counter that natural pressure on the spine on a hunched spine. The other thing as far as the lumbar is concerned, the tendency is to push the thigh forward and hang that lumbar. I'll show you the difference. Usually in a long lumbar spine, there will be immense space on the back end of the spine. But when you hang the thigh forward, this gets compressed. The back of the lumbar gets squished and the abdomen swells. This causes a root compression, a compression of the spine itself, which must be reversed. That's why we say the top buttock muscle should be down, and that takes the abdomen towards the spine, keeping the lumbar long. This should be there in all poses. Now I'll show you what to do with the concave back. So you're turning, just like what you felt, put your hand on the ground. This is what you mean, right? That you're hunched. What I want you to do is take 2 blocks for 2 hands and raise the height. Adjust the hips in one line. When you raise the height up, you pull the level of the spine a little up. Keeping it up doesn't compress or doesn't crash the spine in the first place. With this, you see, naturally it addresses or removes the hunch to a great deal. Beyond that, the student has to lengthen the sternum so much that the back rib is able to go fully towards the front rib, maintaining a long side chest and a very long sternum. When that is done, you see how beautifully the swell of the back ribs, the swell of the hunch, goes inside, delivering the concave back position that we have been talking about. Additionally, using blocks also releases the hamstring for people where the hamstring is tight, and also for people where the back is still not a very strong back, where the paraspinal muscles are still not very strong. It gives you a chance to work with both the flexibility or the stretching of the hamstring and the conditioning of the paraspinal muscles as well as the chest. That's the reason we said that the concave back position is a very important step in PARSVOTANASANA. So if you have a tendency where your back hunches while going into PARSVOTANASANA, then first you take the bricks at their tallest level. Holding the bricks at the tallest level, you have to scoop the back ribs in, elongate the side of the body and the chest forward. You have to train yourself to be in this position for a long time, many attempts over several weeks before you move into the next position where the brick is lowered by 1 level. As the brick is lowered, you have to still make sure you're grabbing the brick to extend the chest forward. There should be no difference between the penetration of the back ribs between the first and second pose. Once this is done, then you're ready to remove the bricks and go into concave back position with the hands cup shaped.
I have one more question. So far we've been treating the poses as active, but you did mention there was a passive variation. So could you please show me how to do that?
See, actually an active pose means the entire body is alert and with a lot of strength you deliver a pose such that the asana has actively touched every fragment of your body. When it's a passive pose, the alignment of the pose is not compromised. You're still making sure, because it's alignment that gives equanimity to all parts of the body. So we are maintaining a highly aligned pose, but with the head rested. When the head rests, the brain relaxes. Despite the fact that you're physically doing the pose, it's extremely calming on the brain. That is what we'll be approaching now. So you stand with your legs forward in PARSVOTANASANA. Get the hip in one level, and then straight reach your palms down to the bolster. After you do that, I want you to place your elbows down with the palms facing each other. Walk your elbows forward so that, as I said, the alignment of the body is not compromised. The body should go far and this dorsal should go in, chest should be lifted forward. Then, when you arrive at the pose, you cross your hands to hold and rest your head down. In such a way, you can stay for a few minutes in this pose because the head is rested, the body is long, the legs are functioning, but it's very calming as far as the effects on the brain and nerves are concerned. This is what we mean by a passive pose. We thus saw how PARSVOTANASANA needs to be done. PARSVOTANASANA was taught in two positions, the concave back position as well as the full position. A practitioner must take care to do the concave back position quite a few times before approaching the final pose. It is also important to make sure that you do both sides equally for the equal number of time as well as for the length of time. PARSVOTANASANA in the full pose is not easy to deliver right at the first shot. We saw how props may be used to adjust the hip to make the chest as well as the spine fully functional. Therefore, props help a practitioner do things which he or she by himself may find difficult to overcome. Initially, when a beginner starts practicing PARSVOTANASANA, you needn't worry about spending too long in the pose. You touch and go. But as time progresses, you want to spend more time moving from 10 seconds to 20 seconds to 30 seconds, possibly a minute, where you're using the time to make sure that all the adjustments to all parts of the body is felt and deliberately done. We'll now look at some of the benefits of PARSVOTANASANA. PARSVOTANASANA has two states, as we saw, the active as well as the passive. In the active state, because you're turning, rotating the hip, it delivers joint mobility to all parts of the lower trunk of the body, namely the hip, knee and the ankle. And from there, because you lengthen the spine, all factions of the vertebral column, every single section of the vertebral column, including the disc, is decompressed, delivering great relief to the spine. Then we move into the final pose, which is the forward extension in the Paschima Pranasthiti. The back muscles get released, the paraspinal muscles extend. Now this also gives great comfort to the back. In the passive position with the head rested, again the nervous system as well as the brain gets totally relaxed and calmed. Hence, PARSVOTANASANA is a complete physiological as well as a psychosomatic pose.